So once again, thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Lori Harrer. I am the program and volunteer coordinator for 350 Deschutes. My pronouns are she and her, and I am located here in Bend, Oregon on this slightly cloudy, a little colder day. We're having a little bit of a cold front here after having some very, very warm days, but I'm sure it'll get nice and warm for us again. So we are very excited to have all of you folks here again today. Thank you so much for everybody being here. We have some excellent speakers who are going to share their wonderful knowledge and expertise with us on being prepared for this upcoming wildfire season. So there, yes. So for our agenda today, first we're going to hear from Kemak, the Fire Prevention and Mitigation Specialist from the Nez Perce Tribe Forestry and Fire Management Division. Next, we'll get to hear from Peter Brewer, who is an air quality expert with ODEQ, or the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Next, we'll hear from Boone Zimmerly, who is the Deschutes County Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator for Project Wildfire. He's the director of Project Wildfire, so we're very excited to have him here. And finally, we're going to hear from Stephanie Krantz, who is the Climate Change Coordinator with the Nez Perce Tribe Water Resources Division. And then we're going to end with a nice Q&A opportunity for all folks to be able to ask your questions from these amazing experts. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them up in the chat, or either throw them up in the chat or hold on to them for our final sort of Q&A with the experts. And in particular, Peter Brewer is going to have a little bit more of a Q&A style presentation. So if you have any questions specifically about air quality, you'll be able to ask him during his talk. So we've got a lot to cover today. Once again, we're really excited to have everybody here. And I think with that, we can go ahead and get started. So first, we're going to hear from Kemak. And I'm going to swap over to his thing. If you'll bear with me for just a moment, please. There we go. All right, Kip.
All right, thank you. Appreciate everybody's attendance today, and thanks for having me. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about mitigating for wildfire, what you can do around your home and property to mitigate against any damages from wildfire. So yeah, I'm Kemak. I'm the Fire Prevention and Mitigation Specialist for the Nez Perce Tribe Forestry and Fire Management. All right, next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about history. Historically, fires moved through this area every few years, 25, 50 years. It kept the understory of the forests nice and clean, kept the trees healthy. Basically, the past 100 years, we've been suppressing wildfires since Western settlement, and fire became the enemy, and we didn't really realize that fires were part of the ecosystem. So in the forest anyway, what we're trying to do, and as a forestry department, is playing catch up. And this is a timeline of a ponderosa pine forest with fire every 20, 40, 50 years, starting on the left hand, going to the right hand. And then that bottom right slide is without any fire suppression, or with fire suppression over 80 years. You can see there's a lot of other different species of trees that have grown up. It's grown really thick, and we're finding out that that's unhealthy for the forest. It's hard for the trees to compete with each other. So the trees are unhealthy. It introduces insects and disease. So next slide, please. And that's just on the forest side of things. So I'm sure Boone will have more on this. This is kind of a perfect scenario of what communities can do to become a fire adapted community. It takes a lot of cooperation with local elected officials, local organizations, the fire department, keeping your community wildfire protection plans, implementing them and keeping them up to date, and neighborhoods maximizing their defensible space as well as homeowners doing the same thing. So that's kind of a perfect world scenario. That's where we'd like to be, but it's going to take a lot to get there. All right, next. So what we're trying to protect homeowners and neighborhoods from are these flying embers. That's the real hazard from these wildfires. In most instances, these flying embers can fly out ahead of the fire more than a mile. I like to say it's sort of like a spider reaching out its legs out ahead of the fire and puts everything at risk in the path of those embers. It's kind of like an ember storm, as you can see in that little video clip there. All right, next slide. So what makes up these embers? Pine needles, pine cones, wood shake shingles.
This here. I don't know what we're doing. You're not.
And yeah, so that's what makes up the embers. Some of them are very large, and like I said, can go out over a mile. These hot embers can land in on rooftops, gutters, bushes next to homes. Next slide, please. So this is a good example of ember ignition and not the actual fire touching a structure to ignite it. So you'll see the fire at the top of the slide move down, and it destroyed 4 homes up at the top of the screen. And then there's 2 homes in flames across the road. So an obvious ember ignition from those flying embers, either from, you know, the pine cones and the wildland up above, or homes also create ember storms. There's a lot of flying materials that come off homes that are burning. Next slide, please. So we had a large fire in my area a few years back, and this is a perfect example of ember ignition. These were straw bales out in the middle of a field, and the fire was in the background of the slide, and you can see how it just touched off some of those straw bales that were susceptible to an ember storm. You can see the burn spots from those hay bales. So perfect example of an ember ignition. Next slide, please. Okay, so what can be done? So community members, homeowners, business owners can create survivable space. I like to call it survivable space because we don't really want people sticking around to defend their property. It really puts people at risk. So I like to call it survivable space, knowing that you can leave your house and have it not be susceptible to ignition from a wildfire. And that includes a number of simple and more complex tasks that you can do around your property. Next slide, please. So looking at the home itself, you can look at its construction characteristics. You can look at the attachments to houses. Is there a wood fence attached? How's your deck attached to your house? Is it in good condition? You know, are there something as simple as a welcome mat, a straw welcome mat on the front patio can have an ember land on that and ignite that. And we've seen some instances of just that, or a broom on the front patio leaning up against a house. A straw broom is susceptible to embers. Are you storing your firewood around close to your home during fire season? You know, during fire season, get the wood away from your house. Either put it in a shed, garage, or get it at least 30 feet away from the home if it is exposed. How's your yard? Is your yard kept up? Is the grass green? Is that grass long and dry? And then other things. I saw a home last year. I thought the home was in pretty good shape, seeing it before the wildfire, but they had a lot of patio furniture and cushions, and they lost their home to a wildfire just because of some patio cushions. So some simple things you can do, you know, if a fire is coming, get those patio cushions, but that patio furniture cushions off the deck. Like I said, move the firewood away, bring in that welcome mat, put it in an enclosed area, the garage or a shed. Next slide, please. Yeah, so landscaping around the home. This is a planter box under a window, you know, or are your flowers up against your home well watered? If not, you know, clean that planter box out and get that dry fuel out of there. All right, next. And then this is a good example of a wood shake shingle roof on a house. The roof of your house exposes the most surface area to flying embers. It's the most susceptible surface of your home that these embers will collect on. So, you know, if there's a wood shake shingle on your house, shake shingle roof, you know, when it comes time to replace your roof, think about metal or asphalt shingles is another good option. Clay tiles is a great option. A lot of communities won't allow these wood shake shingles for roofs anymore. Next slide, please. And then this is a good example of a fence. Even in urban areas during the 4th of July, you see a lot of fireworks igniting bushes along fence lines adjacent to properties, and that fire will move along that wood fence if there's not a quick response and ignite the home that way. It kind of acts like a wick from the wildland to your home. So on the next slide, we'd like to show put at least, you know, 3 feet of non-combustible material between the fence and the home, such as this this metal fence here, where they made the gate a metal gate, which is a great idea. That way that wood fence isn't right up against the structure to ignite it. All right, next slide. All right, so structure survivability. So, well, I know a lot of us don't have 60 to 100 feet around our property. Sometimes your neighbor's house is within 20 feet of your home, but as little as 60 to 100 feet of clearance can save a home. And that's even in an intense crown fire. Of course, the more clearance is better, but this Firewise concept, we call it, it shows 3 zones. And then zone 1 is being closest to the home, zone 2 being 30 feet out, and then zone 3 is 30 feet beyond, out to 100 feet. Again, that's in a perfect world, and then we'll go through some other steps you can take here following this concept. So planting, you have a lot of choices in what you plant around your home. All plants will burn in intense fire. And I like to show the fire triangle here. Fuel, heat, and oxygen are what allows fire to burn. You take away one of those sides and fire no longer can burn. So what we want to control here is the fuel side of the triangle. So if you take away that fuel, that fire can't burn. So try to look for Firewise plant species. And those are species of plants that are moist during the fire season. They don't have a lot of flammable oils or resins, low fuel. They produce less litter, or they stay small as a growth characteristic, compact or low, and that just interrupts the fire path to the home. And that interrupts that one leg of the fire triangle. So this is a house with juniper around it. Juniper has a lot of flammable oils and resins in it. And this juniper, which is probably 10 feet in spots, will create flame lengths up to 30 feet high because of those oils and resins. And it's also a plant that creates a lot of deadfall below it. If you lift up the bottom branches on this juniper, you would see a lot of a deep layer of duff. And it's just tinder dry under there. So it's good to, I call juniper landscaping with gasoline, just for that purpose. It's a bad plant to have up against your home or even near the home. So can wildfire prepared landscaping be attractive? It can, and this is an example of a Firewise demonstration garden in Boise, Idaho. It's part of the Boise Botanical Gardens. There's a lot of species that are attractive that will disrupt that fire path to the home. All right, next slide, please. So we talked about the zones, zone 1 being a non-combustible zone directly adjacent to the home. So we like that zone to be at least 4 feet from the structure. So you could see, you know, instead of landscaping with bark or wood chips or something or straw, you know, landscape with rock, and you can see some Firewise species of plants in there. You can see that the siding on that house is stone, but even if it was a vinyl siding or something combustible, they still have about a foot clearance up off the ground for fire that fire would have to reach. And with that kind of rock and those kind of plants, you just wouldn't have fire right up against the house. And there's a lot of examples out there. I'll share some other resources here at the end of this slideshow that you can look up for a list of Firewise plant species. So May is Wildfire Awareness Month. And I'd like people to know, you know, as you're out doing your spring cleaning, picking up plants or planting around your home, planting your garden, you know, take a look around your structure and look at anything that can allow that fire to continue to your home. You know, check your gutters, make sure your gutters are cleaned out of all those fall leaves and fall needles. Pick up any deadfall that has gathered around the home. We all have these little vestibules in some of our homes that, you know, those are the spots where the leaves gather with the wind and stuff. So it's good to just rake that stuff up, get your house hardened for the oncoming fire season. So this is an unfortunate picture. I worked with the Youth Conservation Corps every summer, and we take a couple of weeks and we clean up around people's homes that can't do it themselves. So we'll spend 2 weeks cleaning up, and you'll see this juniper on the top slides around this home. The home was just inundated with juniper, and you know, we could only do so much without the landowner having a backhoe or something come in to pull these out. So we trimmed it a little bit, and we visited this place 2 years in a row, and the juniper was left, and we basically just kind of touched it up a little bit so he could walk around his house, basically use the sidewalk and his stairs. But down below is that same house in the same, pretty much the same shots as the slides above. And that was lost in a wildfire last year, which, you know, that much juniper around the home, it was just waiting for an ember to land in there and ignite it. But unfortunate instance, but you know, there are some small steps you can take. So additional resources, Firewise USA program is a great program. Visit their website. They have a lot of free materials for fire departments to use, community members to use. You can print some stuff off, and or you can download stuff, or you can email them and they'll send you brochures and that kind of thing. Keep Oregon Green has a great website to follow as far as being Firewise. Fire Adapted, the Ready, Set, Go program, which is about evacuation and what you should know before fire season. And then Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They kind of are the people behind what you can use in construction materials that is fire resistant, fireproof. They kind of do the experiments to find out which materials are good to use. So with that, I don't know how I'm doing on time, but
Right. Well, thank you very much,
thank
Kip.
you.
Thank you for that presentation. That was wonderful for a really good overview of just how folks can protect their homes and create those safety zones around their homes. One question I have for you before we move on to our next speaker would just be a question about how can these wildfire mitigation strategies be adapted for maybe folks who don't live in traditional homes, or maybe don't have, you know, a particular piece of landscape where they can make those decisions about, you know, what sort of landscaping is around their residence. What would you suggest for maybe some of those folks?
So are you suggesting like a rental, like apartments or
Sure, yeah, like a
or-
rental or an apartment, or maybe somebody who's living out of a camper van or something like that. What's maybe ways that they can use these, you know, what you presented to us here in a way that could help keep them safe?
Sure. So especially with a camper, just make sure the place where you pull in to stay is has that clearance that I was talking about. You know, make sure you have 30 feet of clearance from vegetation. You know, take a look around, make sure all the fuels are thinned out. If you're just encased in a forest setting, you know, it's probably not the best place to stay. So just make sure you have some clearance. And then for rentals, you know, you can kind of look at the same thing, but just make sure, you know, you could also put a little pressure on the landlord saying, hey, you know, this stuff isn't cleaned up out here. Is there something you can do to make us a little safer?
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you for that. We'll have more time to ask Kip our questions at the end, but we need to move on, unfortunately, with our webinars. We're pretty jam-packed.
Yep.
So
Thank you
so much, Kip. All right, so our next speaker is going to be Peter Brewer, and he is our Oregon Department of Environmental Quality expert. Peter, would you like to perhaps share your screen, and we'll kind of do this as more of a question and answer, and you can kind of talk us through some of your resources.
Okay, will do. Let's see.
Oh, maybe stop share. That might help you.
Ah, there we go.
There you go.
Yes, I was getting some questions. My screen is like, what? What the heck is that? Okay, good. I think you can see. Let me move my little speakers over. All right. Well, initially you see just a image from Oregon DEQ, air quality map showing all around the state, and also the air quality kind of descriptions on the right-hand side. Can you see screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thanks.
Okay, good. Forgot to ask that to make sure. All right, so we'll move from here. And let's just go into some questions. I have a bunch of screens to show of different images, different features that some of you may grab, some of you may already have, but we'll try to move pretty quickly. So if you're outside a lot, maybe you live outside, and it's hard to say what to do exactly, but gosh, like last year we had a whole bunch of smoke in the area. And this is more of a map of the whole region. This is off of the Air Now site and has other little purple air or other monitors thrown in to give you an idea. But if you don't live or work indoors, how do you protect yourself? Well, I guess the easiest thing to say is wear an N95 or 100 mask. And this day and age, now that we know that much better, and we know we can have smoke for a week or a week and a half as of last year, or if you're down in Southern Oregon, sometimes you have smoke for 30, 35 days throughout the summer. Maybe you should get a whole bunch of N95 masks and get them now. And it's hard to say, but I think we have a lot more out there. That's about the easiest thing to say if you're actually living outside at the time. Either try to get to better air quality if you can, or you hopefully have a whole pile of masks that you can wear. I know that's very difficult, but it's something that I would do. Okay,
Yeah,
and
so Peter, follow-up question, because everybody nowadays has a whole bunch of masks on hand thanks to the COVID pandemic. Would wearing just one of the normal medical masks do anything for smoke inhalation, or do you really need to get that N95 mask?
you really need the N95 mask. The current ones is for inhalation, for all that. They will do pretty much nothing for you for maybe just a few percent for wildfire smoke, especially when it's heavy. So yeah, that's the hard part to really clarify that. early on in our pandemic, I was wearing an N95. I'm like, I'm not going outside or meeting with people unless I can wear an N95. And then, well, I kind of ran out of them. But then I got into more, but then you realize you don't quite need that level of protection. But fortunately, I have more, and I need to get like a stack of 10 or so more of those for just personal use. I have some for work also. They're very important. So yeah, and different levels of smoke hazard. What does that mean? And what about, no, you're like, okay, I'm going to go out into the smoke. Yeah, I don't really care. I'm 18. Or as I think of how I was at that time, you're pretty impervious to things, but it helps if somebody explains. And here's a good explanation. I tend to go out. I'm older. My lungs are great, but say I'll go out in unhealthy for sensitive groups, but only for a short time, to my car, to back, or into a restaurant or what. But if I wanted to run and it's a USG unhealthy for sensitive group, that's at the standard or above for a shorter term, I don't do it. I don't go out. I don't run. Because that's when the smoke particles bury in your lungs. What we're also finding out that is likely our hazard levels. These are more generically kind of aligned, and normally they'd be to micrograms per cubic meter, but it's a little harder to understand those. But we're thinking of reducing that hazard level down to a lower level. And so these would all stay the same, but the level of smoke would shift. So for unhealthy for sensitive groups, it'd even be at a smaller level of smoke, as we're finding out more and more about how unhealthy it is. But yeah, you could do some stuff unhealthy for sensitive groups, but for me, unless I was working outside, anything unhealthy and above, I'm absolutely wearing a mask and only out for a very short time. And the mask is N95. If I was very healthy, maybe I could be out, not being aerobic, not breathing lots and lots of air, having your heart going in the USG or unhealthy for sensitive group zone for a while. If it's severely impacted smoke in that very unhealthy through hazardous, like we saw last year a bunch, I tried not to go out. I didn't walk. I only have a cat, but I didn't let the cat go out for days. The cat really wanted to go out. It was like, I'm sorry, I have chickens, and I felt sorry for them. They seem to survive, have shorter lives, but yeah, I only went out wearing a mask. Put it that way. I had to go out and do certain things with work and certain things private.
Okay, so you're saying any hazard level that's at the unhealthy for sensitive groups or above, we should try to avoid as much outdoor activity as possible unless you're wearing one of those masks.
Right, exactly.
Excellent.
That's a good way to think about it.
All right, thanks for that.
All right, so yeah, what about sometimes we get heavy smoke in our area? I'll jump to the Air Now site that hopefully a bunch of you have online. Yeah, sometimes we do, but the fires come in from the north, say, or from the south. We've had fires far away as Southern California come and impact parts of Oregon. We've had fires from British Columbia impact Oregon, but also definitely fires from Washington or some other areas, or fires from Oregon impacting, say, Idaho and Montana or Nevada, things like that. Very important, though, to just pay attention to smoke levels and what you're hearing, what you should be wearing. If it's all clear out, and your nose may be desensitized a bit, but if it's all clear and you can see for more than 5 miles, very clear, hey, take your mask off, breathe that fresh air, get that in your lungs. But if it's smoky, like we have seen other times for days, or in Pendleton, say, or in Joseph Enterprise area, they had hazardous smoke from the western part of the state this last year. And that was a horrible scene, but yeah, they had to wear masks for days. I hope people did. And so, yeah, is all smoke dangerous? What about smoke from controlled burns? From the spring or fall kind of forest burning? Those are generally, they're a short-term objective, short-term goal, and you have a smoke for a short term, but it can be very heavy smoke. We had some prescribed fire burns very recently here in the Bend area. And we actually, unfortunately, we exceeded the air quality standard one day, but it was about like say 5 or 6 days or 5 or 6 hours of super horrible smoke. Of course, it started at about 2 a.m. And was mostly cleared out by 7 a.m. But it's horrible smoke if you had to be out in it. I hate to say that, and that was a burn right on the edge of town. But that can happen. But mostly you pay attention to what's going on with smoke, wear a mask, don't go out. But those are always advertised ahead of time. So get on any lists that you can to hear about smoke ahead of time, like the night before. Oh, there's going to be a fire. It may hit town, blah, blah, blah. Well, don't have your windows open all night long. Shut them. Be smart about it. That's the best thing I can say for that kind of action. Is it's usually advertised. There's a lot of media on this. There's lots of web pages or text messages, things like that, telling you about it. So get on those lists if you can.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah. So thank you for that. There is a website for Central Oregon for prescribed burns. We have that on our website, the 350deschutes.org/livingwithwildfires. And I will attempt to put that in our chat so that folks can find that link as well. Thank you very much, Peter, for presenting and sharing some of these. I want to ask, would you be able to put some of the links for these fire and smoke maps in the chat so that other folks can maybe find them? I know some of these tools we have linked to on our website, but I would like to make sure that all of these are ones that are available so that folks can take a look at this, because these websites are excellent for being able to look at the air quality of you know, as you folks can see, all of the Northwest, even for any fires that are going on. Oh, and it looks like Boone did put that Central Oregon Fire link in the chat. So centraloregonfire.org, that's the one for finding out if there are prescribed burns here in Central Oregon and where they're going to be happening. It's a great website to check out.
Okay, I'll do that. Am I cut off, or do I have a few more minutes?
Maybe sort of a final closing statement,
okay.
if you will. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Best way to really track fires, yeah, there's a prescribed burning site. It's on your local forest management. A lot more of those throughout Oregon are getting started up from their local forest, or you have to get online through your local forest. For smoke impacts, there's a Oregon Smoke blog spot. Right now we're redoing it. It's not the friendliest, unfortunately, but so I would just jump on the Air Now. It's an EPA kind of site, says fire and smoke up here, and it gives you a big region. So you can blow up the map, get really local if you want, or take it back down. And if you get really detailed, you could get to things like satellite images of what's going on for the day, for that moment, for those 5 minutes or so. Or you get into smoke modeling. This is a little bit more complex, but say, yeah, you can see where smoke is, what's going on for a short period of time now, you know, for your area. So those are pretty cool sites. I look at all these and about 50 other sites during smoke season. There's just too many in my head to really share at the moment. But I do look at a ton, and I'll try to give a few links. But anybody can also feel free to look me up, Peter Brewer with Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Send an email, I'll give you a response back. I try to do that for everybody I can.
All right, well, thank you so much, Peter. We could continue. Yes, there we go. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So that was Peter. So once again, thank you, Peter, for presenting on air quality. And for everybody who's been sharing stuff in the chat, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and questions and things like that in the chat. We'll try to make sure to address your questions at the end when we get to our Q&A panel.